My greetings to you all and welcome to our seventh episode of the Afrolic 21 podcast. This week we'll be presenting the second part of my conversation with Professor Berhanu Abegaz. Professor Berhanu is a prominent organic chemist in Africa who taught organic chemistry at the University of Botswana and Addis Ababa University for more than 40 years. And he also served as the executive director of the African Academy of Sciences, where he initiated important research support programs under the academy. Currently, he is an emeritus professor at Addis Ababa University and is also a member of the African Union Science and Technology Committee, which is advising the African Union Commission. During the first part of our conversation, Professor Berhanu covered the trends of chemical science, education, and research in Africa, and some of the support programs he and his colleagues initiated to enhance African countries, African universities' capacities to carry out science research through an inter-Africa universities collaboration. This was followed by his explanation as to what the African Union Committee on Science and Technology has been doing over the last 10 years, highlighting the major focus areas. Today we are presenting the second part of our conversation. Building upon this one, as you were the executive director of the African Academy of Sciences, what could national academies of African countries and the African Academy of Sciences could do to move towards more cutting-edge research areas through collaborative network engagement amongst African countries and African universities and research institutions?
This is an excellent question. And I think it really has a national as well as African dimension. Well, when you talk about the role of an academy, basically there are three basic functions. What an academy does is identification of excellence, and this would mean look among the nationals in that country who meet certain criteria of excellence, and then they become fellows of the academy. So if you look at the African Academy of Sciences, which has existed really for many, many years, maybe 35, 40 years, maybe it has 700 or 800 fellows. In fact, when I took over that responsibility in Kenya, there were 180 male fellows and only 3 women fellows. So I looked at the weakness and strength of the academy, and one weakness that I saw was that the number of female fellows should be increased. And I think when, I don't remember the figures when I left, but the number of women had exceeded 100, from 3, mind you, in 6 years. And the total number had exceeded 700. Now I think it's more than that. So in that way, we were able to improve the various levels. We also identified champions where they use this to do even more for the continent. We felt that in establishing programs, we said there were 3 things that should be important. And we said it should be any program to assist the continent should be African-specific, African-centered, and African-led. In that way, I think we want to move the center of gravity to Africa when it comes to making decisions, and this sticking to this criteria was very useful. I remember there was a fellow from UK who had established a fantastic biomedical facility at the coast in Kenya, supported by the Wellcome Trust. So he wanted to retire, and he thought of a brilliant idea to start a funding program to African scientists. But his belief was, like we said, with the center of gravity changing to Africa. So he came and he wanted to talk to me, and in trying to explain to him, this is the 3 documents about our academy, and this, which one is that? The strategic plan. Said, I have read it. And this is another. He said, I have. Apparently, he came very prepared, reading all that has been published about the academies. Then I said, okay, I must take this person seriously. How can I help you? Then he said, I have an idea to start a funding agency. I will be retiring from where I've been, and I have discussed this with Wellcome Trust, and I want to come to the academy, lead this as the director, and start this. So I said, that is very good, but we've always said that programs that we start from here, especially by the academy, they have to be led by an African, Africa-centered, and Africa-specific. He listened to me and he said, I have no problem with that. And that really allowed us to access one of the richest funding organizations, and we were able to hire good people. Even I think when we had difficulty finding good applications for the posts that we advertised, and he said, we can assist you where your salary rates are. And they said, don't worry, because if there is a difference, then we'll make that up. So salaries were revised, and that increased the number of applications that we're receiving. And so by the time I left, we had 45 professionals. I remember having started with less than 5. So it was a major expansion to develop competence and convincing arguments to persuade funding agencies that we are serious in what we're doing, and they felt confident that they are dealing with, a serious group, and therefore they supported us much more than we expected. And this has been a very pleasant experience.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prof. Let us move to the next question. I think one of the area where you have been active is as part of the African Union Technical Committee. You have been advocating for science, technology, and innovation development in Africa. And perhaps if you could start by briefly highlighting the main focus areas of the science, technology, and innovation agenda of the African Union in relation to Agenda 2063, and what are the major achievements and challenges faced in its implementation?
The African Union for the previous 50 years existed as the Organization of African Unity. And the main purpose of African organization of the OAU was actually to decolonize the entire continent, support freedom fighters, etc., and get rid of the apartheid regime in South Africa. Nelson Mandela has been in prison for 27 years, and his release. It was a new spirit, which unfortunately coincided with the World Bank structural adjustment programs, where elementary school were given more priority than tertiary education. World Bank statements contradicting, like Africa must focus on primary education, but in the long term, they cannot do away without good graduate programs. So why support one and not another, But that enthusiasm came to the creation of NEPAD. NEPAD was essentially an effort to bring a new focus to the continent, African Renaissance, and people like Thabo Mbeki were main actors in that regard. The Senegalese president Abdoulaye Wade, he came up with the Omega recovery plan for Africa. So all this led to the establishment of NEPAD. Now, in 2013, the African Union heads of states and governments said, what do we expect? What is the Africa we want in 2063, 100 years after the establishment of the OAU? So they came up with a document called Africa We Want. It's like, in fact, by then they want politically united, people-centered. It is nicely described if you look at the Agenda 2063. So in 2013, they also decided that let us not wait till 2063. Let's have decadal strategy. One strategy for 10 years, from 2013 to 2024. Then from 2024 to 2034, something like that. So we are in that second decadal strategy now. And the African Union and AAS are partners, if you like, to look at the science, technology, and innovation aspect of each decadal strategy. So, in fact, today I had a meeting at the African Union, and we were reviewing. So some of the emerging technologies that we recommended was like artificial intelligence, blockchain, microgrids, water purification, precision agriculture, telemedicine. I can't go through all of them, but really it's a 3D printing. And on each, there were what we call knowledge products. We had the best African experts write monographs on the importance of this. These are technologies that by a panel were selected as transforming technologies aligned to the developmental needs of the continent. And so this really have become popular, and the focus has always been on the next generation, the youth. I think last year there was an Ethiopian who was 17 years old, and he had an AI result which allowed him in minutes to detect cholera. And it was very inspirational to see young people like this. In terms of, in AI, the whole purpose of the thinking is not to pick a technology that was discovered in Europe and build on it. Actually, to actually do the whole thing from beginning to finish within the continent. And Africa has remarkable progresses in this regard, especially in the fintech field. M-Pesa is over 50 million people transact with it. The number of the amount, the money I forgot now is incredible, So the gene editing, gene drive to get rid of malaria. Sometimes we feel hopeless when you say about 1,000 children die every year before they become 5 years due to malaria. Now, about 10 years ago, this number has gone down to 500 and much less now. When these hopeless situations, it's actually some innovation that brings about unexpected transformative results. And what seems to be a major difficulty is now easy. So in gene drive, I think the African experience and the reviews that I have read say there is no other continent that has made as much progress as the group from Africa. And I think countries that are very notable here is Burkina Faso, Tanzania, Kenya, etc. And we feel that it is possible to imagine a future where where malaria becomes insignificant. It is major solutions. When we talk about relevance, Nothing can be more relevant than that. So AI and many of these technologies have great benefits and also risks associated with them. AI may have its own bias depending on who did it, and if it is data collection, etc., it may ignore certain groups because of some elements that are in the programming of that AI. So it is important that these issues are addressed nationally. And I think the strongest recommendation that I've heard today is that there must be a national body that will make an oversight when critical decisions are made in AI programs. That way, I think it's possible. But AI is so pervasive now. Every student uses AI. So initially, our feeling was AI can also drive cheating, for example, in examinations and things like this. So instead of institutions focusing on policy, and you may find that the AI may be a lot smarter, and therefore our policy to catch that may not be good enough. And therefore, the policy to adopt is to start the introduction of AI at a very young age. And AI is a tool to improve learning. And therefore, if that is the case, then instructors, professors should be involved in monitoring. And in a way, it's like preaching and emphasizing to the young minds the honesty and integrity as important aspects as we develop AI. But if you say that we do the policing work, then that is not going to be very productive.
Yeah.
So that is the kind of approach that I heard today.
That is very interesting, and I'm very glad to hear about the various initiatives and actions taken by your team, your committee, and the African Union Science, Technology, and Innovation
Yes.
platform also. As you rightly indicated, all of the disruptive technologies we talk about, including artificial intelligence, could lead to a lot of benefits if
Yes.
we are able to manage them properly. The problem we
Exactly.
currently have is their deployment up to now at least is to a large extent driven by profit and power concentration rather than improvement
Absolutely.
of well-being of the human population. So
Yes.
the guidance you are providing through your teamwork, your committee, and through the various research teams, the question I want to raise perhaps as a concluding question for
Yes.
our session today is: how far are African countries prepared to make use of the recommendations and insights that are being generated through your teamwork? And what could be the role of universities, research institutions across Africa to facilitate this transition, to make the disruptive technologies more beneficial to African countries,
Yes.
both in terms of promoting human well-being, but also ecosystem well-being? I mean, what
Yeah.
should be done by countries, universities, and research institutions in terms of enhancing our preparedness? The challenge is already
Yes.
on our doorstep, and we need to act as fast as possible. And what are the key issues that need to be considered by countries, universities, research institutions, and development partners also?
Yes. Just to one point is, I remember once, I think it was University of Botswana, I went to the research office and I said, I want to look at the partnership agreements you have with outside institutions. And a big folder came. And I just said, I have a second question. How many of these MOUs, etc., are with African institutions? And the guy stopped. I said, because they're all with North institutions. So we must make it a point to co-develop with other African brothers and sisters, with other institutions. And we have resources. We have, in fact, good research projects. And the reason North institutions come and work with us is because they find good projects, especially in health, etc., in Africa. And so they are leading, we are following, and somehow when AI and all these are included and the biases came, and we are not there to defend or to make decisions and make sure that these are benefiting Africa, or at least be equitable. So partnership training is something that should be looked into. One of the things that our co-chair, the late Callistus Juma, was advocating was for African heads of governments to have science advisors. And therefore, I raised this even today, and we said our link with member states should be one, with presidential or prime ministerial science advisors, or with parliamentary committees on science. In fact, I raised, there is the African Parliament. Is there a committee for science? Can we call for such a committee? So we work with them. And then depending on their contributions, we must really recognize certain presidents or prime ministers as champions and explain to them why we are doing this, and therefore is to raise the level of awareness, minimize corruption, and really have science, the benefits of science is equitably distributed throughout the country, throughout the region. One of the major things that the AU has done is this cross-border trade among African countries. This has been approved now. And so I remember Nkrumah's speech. He said, if any two countries want to collaborate in Africa, it seems like no two countries recognize each other's currency. So you always have to find a dollar, and actually he said from a crook at the border to change money for you, so you can do purchasing in the other country. So the African Free Trade Area is something that it's been about 3 years now, and they're having regular meetings. If you have an African currency, then it must be an Africa Central Bank that should actually look into this, raise interest rates, etc. I believe like that. So this is kind of a conclusion, and therefore I want to say that if we work together in the area of education, in the area of agriculture, in the area of ICT, and really work together with sectoral ministries that are heavily involved in development, then I think Africa will have a future.
Those are very interesting points. One of the topic I covered during one of my thematic episode was during which I underlined that African countries need to move away from blind leapfrogging and incidental leapfrogging and focus on promoting transformational leapfrogging. Most of the points you are highlighting are part of this transformational leapfrogging agenda, because that requires to be demand driven and be context specific and have a basis within the continent. So we need to have this engagement move towards. I mean, there are so many reports and experts talking about Africa leapfrogging, but we need to qualify that so that it serves Africa's interest and serves or promotes well-being in a more sustainable way. So the work you are doing need to be taken down to the ground level through the national networks and institutions. And one of the tasks of this Afrolit 21 podcast is also to facilitate this kind of dialogue and conversation. And perhaps you can give us your final reflection on this, and we can conclude our discussion for today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. One point I wanted to add is, the so-called demographic dividend. It is expected that, I don't remember the year now, 70% of the global population that is under 19 will be in Africa.
From Africa.
Yes, from Africa. So that means any international collaboration that contributes to the proper training and skilling of those people 25 years from now. If Europeans, Japanese, whatever, put money into this, it's not just for Africa, it's also for their own good.
Yep. Yeah.
And therefore, we need eloquent speakers that can really put this up there for everyone to understand. But we must also demonstrate that we are serious in trying to get this, achieved.
So that's true. I mean, that is one of our primary logo, is that Africa could be a positive contributor and solution provider for the global sustainability transition.
Yes.
So whatever would happen within Africa will have significant impact to what would happen at the global level. And I think this kind of work need to come together at every level in order to have that transformational impact. I'm sure we'll get back on another episode again. Professor Berhanu, thank you very much for your time and for your insight. And we thank you very much for all the service you have provided for the continent and the leadership you are providing today also through the various mechanisms you are involved in.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you again. Yeah.